Cool. All right. Well, really appreciate everyone taking the time, whether you're calling in East Coast, Central, Mountain, or Pacific. My name is Ben Barton. I'm an account executive with Paperless Parts. I've been with the company for 4 years. So currently responsible for Northern California, helping demonstrate the software, speak to the value that folks typically experience when they invest in the software. Prior to that role, I was one of the leads of our implementation team. So I've helped implement the software that you folks will see today over 100 times with shops ranging from $0 to $150 million in revenue, primarily CNC machining and sheet metal. So one of the things I'll allude to and speak to is, okay, well, how do we also implement the software? You could have the greatest software in the world, and if you can't get it up and running, it's as good as a piece of metal on the shelf. So without further ado, what we're going to talk about today is coding complex parts and how Paperless Parts helps make that a super easy process. So, there's really 3 key ideas that we'll be walking through, which is, okay, you got a complex assembly, a big BOM. Today, you might be manually building that out in your ERP system or in an Excel sheet. How do we make that super, super easy in Paperless Parts and save all that time? The next piece is, okay, you've broken up that complex part or that complex assembly. How do we quote that really, really quickly based on the objective geometry of a 3D file, right? To streamline that process and drive consistency, accuracy, and speed. Then the last piece is this ERP integration, because, okay, that's great. We just saved all this time. We just quoted this complex part super easily. And now how do we get into our ERP system? So those are the 3 ideas that I'll be talking about today. As you folks have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A channel or through the chat channel, and then we'll review them all at the end of the demonstration. So demonstration should take about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll dive into the questions as well. So for folks that aren't familiar, I'm going to start right in what's called the build a quote page in Paperless Parts. For anyone that wants the soup to nuts demonstration, I highly encourage you to schedule a demonstration with someone on our team. But this is, where all the action happens in Paperless Parts. This is how you build a quote. So, as we look through, we're sending a quote to myself at Paperless Parts. We can see some nice high-level information about our relationship with this account or contact. But for the sake of exercise, let's say I'm an estimator at a shop. Okay. And what I'm now going to do is drop in the files that a prospect, a customer, just sent me to quote. And as I drop these in, one of the things I like to always highlight is that Paperless Parts is a CAD viewing, not a CAD authoring software like Siemens NX, CATIA, or SolidWorks. And the reason that's so significant is that you're able to upload any file type that you see here without having a license of that native authoring software, which, as we all know, can be kind of expensive sometimes. So we've got 2 files that we just uploaded. I want to be sensitive to the audience that might be joining here. So I've got a CNC machining part, and then I've also got a sheet metal assembly, which we'll walk through. And I'll start with the assembly just because, that's one of the first items that we're talking about here, which is, okay, well, how do we automate the BOM creation and then the costing? And so we'll kind of balance back and forth with those. If anyone's getting, complex CNC assemblies, the same exact concept applies. So we'll give this part just a moment to load here. One of the things you'll notice is, okay, great, we've got 51 matching parts. So, not surprisingly, this is one of my go-to demo parts. So you'll see that we're able to identify exact file matches, exact geometric matches, just to immediately give you information on, hey, have we done this exact part before? Maybe the customer changed the part number. Have we done anything similar to it? So, give you some very helpful contextual geometric information about that new project that you're working on as well. Because as we're talking about complex parts, one of the things that's always super helpful to know is, okay, like, how have we done anything remotely similar to this in the past, so we can reference that information. So this part's now uploaded, and when I click the thumbnail, what's going to happen is we're going to open up what's called the part viewer. And this is where we're actually able to view those 3D files that were sent by the customer. All right, and for anyone that's wondering, obviously this software does work with PDFs as well, but the magic really comes in with a 3D file. So we've got this 3D file here, and one of the first things we're going to want to start to understand is, okay, well, what are all these individual components? And it's like, okay, got it. Here's the BOM, right? And the reason this is significant is that today, most folks are manually creating all these individual components in their ERP system. With Paperless Parts, this BOM was automatically created. This bill of materials was automatically created. So when we open up the line item, that exact BOM structure that you saw mapped in over there has already been mapped in and built. So you can just insert time per component to build times number of components, and you have that much time saved on every single complex assembly you're working on. So one of the things that's really nice as well, we've got a great partnership with Penn Engineering. So based on the exact geometry, based on the file name, we'll automatically identify PEM components, right from the 3D file, and mark those as purchase components. So what I want to walk through now is, okay, that's great. We've automatically built the BOM. I'm sure you can appreciate how much time that might save on a complex part, how easy that would make it. But now what I want to show you is how easily you can quote these actual manufactured components. And again, we're going to use the example of sheet metal here, and we'll walk through that CNC part in just a moment. All we're going to do is select these 8 manufactured components and then apply what we refer to as a process. All right, and this is really just a template of distinct costing steps that we build with you during the implementation process. So for example, this sheet metal laser process or template has my material information referencing my material database that's brought over from my ERP system. It's probably got my laser work center with all of those labor rates, forming steps, deburring. I can go through and add steps as I need. But as you'll notice here, all these costs just populated. So I've got a default $88 labor rate in here. And when I open up one of these individual components, you'll see that we automatically unfolded the part, got the sheet thickness, and all of our costs automatically updated based on the geometry of this part. All right, and there's no mystery. If we open up one of those distinct costing steps, which again, map to every single shop's work centers that we work with, you'll see, got it, we got the total cut length, the outer cut length, the inner cut length. There's no mystery. All this information comes right from the 3D file that we're working with. So if we look at the forming steps, it's okay, got it. We've got 3 forming steps, 1 unique bend radii. That's what's driving the setup time and runtime. So in a matter of minutes, we've uploaded this assembly, automatically built the BOM, and then both updated 8 of these individual components to the point where quoting now becomes a clerical review exercise rather than a build from scratch exercise. And you're able to save 90% of the time that it would take you to traditionally quote, and then use that time to get quotes turned around faster, these complex jobs that shops and that customers are expecting to get back faster so they can hand out the purchase order. And B, you're able to work on all the other quotes or other responsibilities that I know estimators have, because they're all wearing, often wearing many different hats as well. So that is for sheet metal assemblies in particular, the automatic BOM creation and the automated costing. One of the things I want to highlight as we talk about that third piece as well is this relationship with the ERP integration, because I'm sure a lot of folks are thinking, for example, hey, Ben, that's great. We're looking at this part, it's unfolded. I see how much time it would save us. What about our material information? What about our purchase component list? What about all of our labor rates and work centers? We map all of that in for each shop that we work with during the implementation process. And then for the vast majority of ERP systems, we sync the two systems together. So for example, if you update labor rates in your ERP system, all that information is available here to those respective work centers. If purchasing goes out and gets a new, last in or average cost on 5052, H32, 120 by 48 by, 0.01, 0.08 in this example, right? That material will be available in Paperless Parts so that you can see it live and you're quoting with live up-to-date information. Because the last thing you would want is stale data. And just to, kind of illustrate what that looks like, let's say that there's a different purchase component in here that wasn't identified as a PEM component. You can go through and select from your purchase component list, which is syncing up with your ERP system. So maybe this is one of those buy items as an example here, and we'll convert that over to a purchased component. All right. Now, the best part is, it's talking about this ERP integration piece, is that when you send out this quote, okay, let's say we build this quote, we send it to the customer, and then they were so thrilled with how fast we turned the quote around that, they placed the order with us, right? Now we need to get all this information into your ERP system. And that's really where the ERP integration comes into play. And I always like to talk about this slide just to really highlight, okay, well, what's the relationship with Paperless Parts and how does it tie in with these ERP systems? Because Paperless Parts replaces and consolidates all these traditional estimating strategies that shops have used. Excel, ERP, pen and paper, email. And when you get the purchase order, we automatically push all this information over to your ERP system. The BOM structure that you just saw, right? The material IDs, the work center IDs, purchase component IDs, all of that information is automatically pushed over to your ERP system so that you can go facilitate that post-order process without any double data entry, which is, the worst thing you could have when you're adding new software to your organization. Is that's great, we just saved all this time. Now I got to go manually type that into my new system, or stale data, which is where the two systems aren't speaking together. So that's the relationship with the ERP system. I do want to also speak to the CNC machining side. And just so that we don't have, $13,000 on quantity 10, I'll change that over. Very, very similar, right? So Paperless Parts works primarily with, we deliver the most value with CNC machining and sheet metal components. So all we're going to do here is choose this CNC 3-axis milling template that I've built out. And then we're going to go through and, in the same deal, analyze this file. Now, I think the thing I've really come to appreciate with sheet metal versus CNC machining is from a costing perspective. Sheet metal is a bit more formulaic and scientific, right? There's an objective total cut length broken down into internal and external cuts. There's an objective number of forming steps, an objective number of countersinks, counterbores. You can nest that part, and you could do multi-component nesting to optimize material. And it's all very formulaic and scientific. Whereas CNC machining has a little bit more of art, right, and creativity. You could make this individual part that we're looking at here, a million different ways, right? That's not to say sheet metal is not also artistic, but from a costing perspective, it's harder to start to figure out, okay, like, what is the setup time? How long is this part going to take to program? What's an estimate of the cycle time? How long is deburring going to take? Do we have a whole lot of inspection on this part? So how long is that inspection going to take? So that artistic piece of, really having to rely on tribal knowledge comes into play quite a bit on CNC machining. So one of the ways that we really help shops quote CNC machining, complex CNC machining parts really easily, is by identifying these design for manufacturability warnings. So, we've got this part here, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see, okay, great, we've got all of these manufacturability warnings that were identified. We're going to identify, hey, how many setups are there, right? Estimated setups based on the normal directions. You can see one counterbore was identified, countersinks were identified. But as we start to get into these manufacturability warnings, it starts to inform us of, hey, these are potentially difficult to manufacture features. So we're looking at this part, and I see, okay, got it. These concave fillets are a little bit annoying. So you can imagine you might want to have a conversation with a programmer or a machinist or an engineer and basically say, at Mr. Igor Sikorsky, like, how does this feature impact the cycle time, right? Do we need special tooling? Because what we often hear from shops is, hey, we have all these sorts of conversations. We're trying to get feedback from programmers, engineers, machinists during the quoting process to make sure that we're quoting it accurately and that we're actually going to make a profitable part if we win the job. And we're facilitating all that communication by going out and poking them, or shooting over an email with a PDF copy. But now you're able to tag specific features and annotate within this part and reach out to team members within the context of that exact geometry. And most importantly, those potentially difficult features were automatically identified, right, based on the 3D file. And each shop is able to control the parameters and threshold that triggers each of these warnings, because, we don't want this to be a car alarm, right? You want it to actually inform reasonable, design for manufacturability warnings, so that it's a call to action that, compels you to actually take a peek. So that's one way we really help CNC machining shops quote complex parts more easily, is just give you that safety, that guardrail of, hey, these features might be difficult to manufacture. And then we're also able to give you estimates based on, hey, how many parts per bar are you going to get, right? And this is just, simple math. Hey, we've got a 144 by 4 1/8 by 2.5 inch bar based on the part dimensions, because you're just grabbing the dimensions of the part and you round up given whatever buffer you want to add for the cut tolerance, cut width, part buffer, etc. So it's like, okay, we need 8 parts per bar. That means for each of these respective quantities, 2 bars, 4 bars, 7 bars, 13 bars, etc. So all of that's quickly added up. And then we start to get into the fun part, which is like, all right, what's an estimate? All right, because we're estimating. What's an estimate for how long this part's going to take to program? Well, that part has 183 features that were identified. assume 2 minutes per feature, that's 18.3 hours of setup time or program time, right? Maybe for more complicated parts, you say that it's 3 minutes per feature. So now it's 27.45 hours per part. All right, so that's how you can get an estimate, a consistent estimate on how long programming time might take. If we look at the cycle time piece, right, some shops have different philosophies. Some shops basically like to engineer the quote and break out all the routing steps. The way we look at it out of the, traditionally is, okay, you've got 5 setups. Okay, so from a costing perspective, because we haven't even won the job yet, industry average win rate's 30%. Haven't even won the job, we just want to account for the cost properly. 5 setups, maybe setup time per setup is an hour. All this information can be customized for each shop that you work with, right? You can imagine a heavier part might have a longer setup time per setup, for example. So, okay, great. Our setup time is now 10 hours because the setup time per setup is 2 hours per setup. And then we look at, okay, well, how do we get an objective cycle time? Well, what information do we have available? We've got the part volume, we've got a bounding box volume, assuming a 1/4 inch buffer in each direction, which allows us to understand what the total volume removed is. So we've got 142.866 cubic inches removed objectively, right? And then you can break it down into finishing threshold, semi-finished volume percentage to get drilling volume, semi-finished volume, roughing volume, and finished volume, and apply material removal rates to get an estimate of the total time required to remove each of those machining aspects, right, of this part. And that's just one piece of the cycle time, because cycle time really looks at volume removed, tool changes, and load time. And then because, as we mentioned earlier, there's a million ways to make this part, perhaps, we give you a range of slow, medium, and fast, because you might put it on your best machine, not care about tool life, go super aggressive, right, and get them going much quicker. Or there might be tolerances and there might be true positions that you need to be aware of, which are on the print, which can't be identified from the 3D model. So you make it super easy for you to come in and be like, yeah, well, this part's got some super tight tolerances, so it's actually gonna be 180 minutes to run this part. So there we go, right? We had a good estimate, rounded up, took into account our consideration, our experience quoting this part, and we're gonna go roll with that. So that's how you quote complex CNC machining and sheet metal parts in Paperless Parts. Scroll down, you'll apply a markup. Maybe we know that we can get away with throwing a 25% markup on this part. And then we know that we've got expedite availability in our shop. So maybe we say that standard lead time is 15 days, 5 days faster is 40% markup. And then we're going to send our customer this super beautiful digital quote that allows them to see their parts, see the unit price associated with each of the different quantity breaks and lead times, so we can prop up expedite pricing perhaps. And they can check out right through here, super clean digital experience and Amazon-like experience for a customer. And then when they send you the purchase order, that's where this ERP integration comes into play, because we're going to automatically push all that information over to your ERP system, so you can go on and quote the next complex part. So I promised Allie it would be 20 minutes. I promised you guys it would be 20 minutes. So I think I'm right at 19 minutes. So what I would propose, Allie, unless you want me to keep going, is we can open this up to Q&A and do a nice little, collaborative session. Questions, comments on quoting complex parts in Paperless Parts? I know people have questions. There's 29 people in attendance. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this right here would be your logo, your information. And Allie's gonna tell me. The question asked was, can the quotes be branded as our company? The answer is absolutely. That's where we build out your information right here. Boom, boom, boom. Who fills in all the data to drive the estimate and quote from? And Cam, are you referring to, actually building out the costing steps within each of the individual components? Trust that's probably where this is coming. Yeah, perfect, right? So this would be you, this would be the shop. So when we look at traditional estimating strategies, right, that is an estimator quoting in Excel, ERP system, pen and paper, someone that's got a couple of decades of experience in your shop, quoting out that work. They would now be doing all of that in paperless parts. The difference is it would take them, 1/10 of the time, because all this information automatically came in based on the 3D file, and then they can very easily come through, manipulate whatever they need to get the quote fine-tuned and ready to go out. And then they would send this quote to the customer. So it would still be the exact same personnel that you're using today. Cool. All right. Kelly, I'm going to run through all these, and Tim, I'm going to skip yours if you don't mind, and I'll come back to it later. So Kelly's question is, does the system take into account material types to calculate material removal rates? It absolutely does. So we've got industry standard machinability ratings associated with each material family. And one of the things we do with shops is, update these to make sure they're actually reflective based on the information, running with their actuals in their shop. So as I explained, kind of how we do that, if we look at, got it, here are material removal rates for drilled holes. And let's go look at rough semi-finish instead. So if we search all rows, right, we'll see that, okay, it's copper, tool steel, titanium, plastic, iron, carbon steel. All right, these are all baseline machinability ratings. And one of the ways that we found it super effective, just to make sure this information is actually reflective of each shop's capabilities, is you just supply us 20 parts with actuals the first time you ran it, not the 5th time after all sorts of engineering enhancements. And, we go through and we update these baseline removal rates to make sure that they're actually reflective holistically with the materials you work with and the, the different parts that you're working with. Zakir, share, we're going to say, here's the list of primary ERP systems that Paperless Parts integrates with. Dude, nice. All right, I'm going to roll through. So we got JobBoss, Made to Manage, Plex, Epicor, ProShop, all Infor products, primarily visual and Sightline, MyTrack, Fulcrum, and then Global Shop. And then when will this platform be integrated with ProShop, Anonymous Attendee? I will let other folks at our company and their company speak to that there. Thomas Kemp, as raw materials, stainless steel go up and down, how are the prices updated weekly or monthly? So that's where this integration with your ERP system is so important, because all we're doing in here is referencing CSV tables. So if we look at this material pricing table, for example, you could imagine that you've got your material table in your ERP system, that purchasing is going and updating raw material costs every so often, and that information needs to be available when you quote. So the answer to the question is really, however often you update prices in your source of truth, which is typically the ERP system, is how often prices will be updated in Paperless Parts. How do you add in part-specific material costs versus ERP-based in-house materials? Let me see if I can piece that down. Part-specific material costs versus ERP-based in-house materials. Sounds like a question of purchase components is kind of what I'm hearing. Like, so you might even have like a purchase subassembly or a purchase component. We make it super easy to add purchase components. And if you needed to add a new purchase component, for example, let's say I want to do new component, right? Make it super easy to add in new components and say, okay, yeah, this is 15 cents. And then if this didn't exist in your ERP system during that integration process, right, we would push all that information over. It would create a new purchase component ID because there's no match in your ERP system, right? So it's kind of a balance of, okay, is this a brand new, novel, part-specific material or buy cost, or does it already exist in your ERP system? And we support both of those methodologies. How long does a typical Paperless Parts implementation take to stand up? I know the answer is nuanced, but an average or ballpark would be helpful. Again, I've done this, over 100 times. I've done it in 2 weeks and I've done it in 16 weeks. So the balance depends on how many people are involved, how committed is the shop to the process, right? Because there's a few key steps that go into the implementation process. We got to map over your existing quoting methodology. We got to train people up on each of their individual responsibilities. So it really depends on how aggressive the shop wants to go, because our team is, totally available to drive at the acceleration and the speed that each shop wants to go. But as a ballpark, realistically, I would say 6, 8, 10, or 12 weeks. And again, it depends on number of stakeholders, how nuanced your ERP system is, because the ERP integration is super important as well. And for example, are you quoting in your ERP system today, or are you coming from a super complicated Excel sheet, or do you have a full blown, homegrown quoting system that you've built out? Okay. Zakir, again, does it work with ECI, Shop Tech? It absolutely does. We've got a strategic partnership with the folks at ECI, which is fantastic for all of our shops that have JobBoss or JobBoss Squared, or which is formerly Shop Tech, because their engineers now are participating as well. And I'll plug a call or a webinar that our CEO did yesterday talking about that partnership. So if you want more information, I think there's a whole suite of resources that we can share with your folks. How does this ERP system work if we do not store material costs in our ERP? Well, we make it super easy for you to override everything right in Paperless Parts, because let's say, for example, that, we know that we can get 68 parts per sheet here. And for a quantity of 10, you can just fly through and say, yep, sheet cost is 150 for each of these. That's the sheet cost. You can just override this information. And then you can toggle between using total sheets required or just the net sheet used, and, pass the cost of scrap onto your customer effectively. All right. And then we've got 2 other questions. I think the account for fluctuations in market price of raw materials was answered. And is there any logic to help make the call to outsource? That would be dependent on each shop's capabilities. So I think we'd have to have a further question there. If you could explain in plain English, what requirements would dictate outsourcing the part, you could imagine some nice if-then logic here informing that. But yeah, we need a little bit more information there. What else? Oh, of course. You can quote change as many quantities as you want. So the question is, are we able to adjust the quantities quoted? Come here, let's say 1, 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 100, 1,000. You can do as many quantities as you wanted. Good question. Yeah, another great question, Rebecca. So, how long does it take to get the system up and running? Totally depends on each shop's requirements. Again, I've seen it done in 2 weeks. I've seen it done in 16 weeks. So, it really depends on how many people are going to be involved. How intricate is your current quoting process? Is it a homegrown quoting system? Is it a complicated Excel sheet, or is it just your ERP system with work centers, labor rates, material IDs? And then, how many people are involved that need to be trained up on that process. So realistically, I would prepare for 8 weeks with 2 to 3 hours of work a week. All right. So not that bad at all. You think about, we're super respectful of the fact that, you can't stop your job, right, to implement software. So we made it a super flexible process that allows you to get up and running. Oh, please, Zakir, reach out. We will happily get you a demonstration. Question is, will this presentation be available so I can show others in our company? Ali, I'll let you confirm. I believe the answer to that is yes, this is being recorded, correct?
Yep, we'll send it out to everyone by tomorrow via email.
What added quote unquote features are there to help push or sweeten the deal to get the customers to order a specific quantity that we want? So let's just go ahead and do that example. Let's say, for example, that what I'm really hearing there is like quantity specific markup. So let's go ahead and go back to the CNC part for a moment here. You could imagine, doing a quantity specific markup where let's say you really want them to buy the 25 part, you could go 35% markup for the other 2. So then you totally prop up the quantity of 25 where they're seeing that the unit price there is like 516. It's the absolute cheapest except for the quantity of 100. So you can play around with quantity specific markups. You could do add-ons like only for specific quantities, for example. Yeah, I think I'd be curious to kind of roll out. I understand a little bit better as well as like, how do you do it today? You know what I mean? Because, I'd probably offer that however you do it today, we can start to play around and, make sure that that's available as well. The question is, are you able to push routings into ERP with the BOMs? And you absolutely are. That's exactly what this ERP integration does. So for example, let's say that we're looking at this assembly and we have a routing with each of these individual components. So we go look at this component, for example, and we've got all of our material information, our laser work center, forming work center, deburring, inspection, etc. When you push this over to your ERP system, it's going to automatically build that router tied to tied to your work centers in that respective component within the whole BOM. Which, again, just insert how many assemblies you get, times number of components. I mean, it's a lot of time saved. It's on complex parts. We use JobBoss, but not all the modules. Are there specific modules that should be used to make integration more smooth? I will, honestly, that's a little bit out of my integration knowledge to answer that question. So my proposal would be to speak to one of our integration engineers as a part of evaluating the software. It's a great question. I just don't know the answer. Do I have an ERP that you can show the importation into for us? Yeah, we're here. We might as well. So you can go to YouTube and we'll call Paperless Parts, JobBoss, and we'll go ahead and watch. Actually, you know what? Let's do the JobBoss squared integration.
Hi, I'm Rob Carrington, a product manager at Paperless.
So
suppose the customer sent us a purchase order that indicated they want to buy 100 of this part, along with an additional charge for non-recurring engineering. Let's enter the purchase order number and the facility we will ship to, and then complete the order.
Bruce, it's a great question. I'll answer that right after this. So you're choosing you're saying, okay, great. They sent us this order. Let's complete this order.
As you can see, a new order record was created as a result.
In Paperless
If we look
Parts.
at the details for that order, we can see
now we need to get that in the JobBoss
brought over. First, let's look at the sales order that was just created by the integration. As you can see, the customer, purchase order number, and order total have been populated based on the information from the Paperless Parts order. Additionally, the integration has populated 2 line items, one for the ordered part and one for the non-recurring engineering charge. Next, let's look at the estimate record that was created. At first glance, we can see that the part number and product code were both populated based on the information provided on the Paperless Parts quote. Below, we can also see that the materials and routing sections were populated according to the information provided on the Paperless Parts quote as well. So as you can see
there. So Donald, I hope that answered the question of demonstrating the actual import of information. And then we got a question here of, I don't see an assembly operation on the sheet metal part. How is this accounted for? At the parent level of this assembly, you're going to choose what's called this assembly parent level step. You can always play around with the language and change the name to whatever you'd like. But that's where you account for the assembly step. You might account for welding here at the parent level. And what's nice is you can reference the number of unique components. So it's like, oh yeah, setup time per unique component, 25, 0.25 hours per setup. So, 2 hours of setup. You could say, okay, it's 15 seconds per component. There's 9 components. There you go. I see the JobBoss integration is ProShop integration still being developed right now. Again, I'm gonna let other folks on our team answer that question. I don't know the specific answer to that one today. What else? These are awesome questions. It's good stuff. Questions. There's still 26 of you here. I know, like you folks must have questions. I mean, it's a big deal, you know, how you can save a lot of time in estimating. What else do you want to know? Yeah, Zakir, reach out. We'll be happy to schedule a personal demo. And you know, the other thing is, while everyone's here, I always recommend, like, dude, bring your parts. Like, that's typically the best way to do the demonstration, is just we'll use your parts for the demonstration, so you can judge for yourself if it'll actually work with the, you know, the type of parts that you folks you know, quote day in, day out. Oh, great question. Analytics. Well, you know, the answer is really whatever information you want, because with Paperless Parts, you know, there's so much valuable sales and estimating information that's not necessarily being taken advantage of today. So, you know, there's just total quote volume. All that information is pretty straightforward, win rate, but you can start to really understand, hey, how are we doing by specific customer? How are we doing by quote turnaround time? All right, so we invested in Paperless Parts on the assumption that we're going to be able to turn quotes around faster, right? So did that actually pan out? How fast are we turning quotes around in less than an hour, 1 to 4 hours, 4 to 12 hours? And what did that do for our win rate? How are we doing by specific material, specific quantity, size, machining centers, et cetera? I mean, really any sales or estimating question or piece of information you could want is now available at your fingertips. Is there an ability to track manufacturing actuals against the quote in your system, or does that reside in the ERP? Bruce, great question. Still resides in the ERP. So you're going to do all your job costing in your ERP system. There's a way that you can imagine bringing in a CSV table of part number and just pulling the actual to compare just from an information perspective in Paperless Parts, but like any job costing of updating the engineering master or anything, you'll still do in your ERP system. Question is, can you send out RFQs from Paperless Parts for finishing or outsource needs? And you absolutely can. Let's go back to this part here. We've got this internal collaboration functionality here. And what we're going to do is now share this externally. This is particularly attractive, right, with any sort of ITAR work or export controlled work, because Paperless Parts is ITAR compliant. So, you know, we can say, hey, here's a finishing RFQ, and we're going to send this to Ben Plus RFQ at paperlessparts.com. And what this is going to do is you can say, please quote quantities 1, 5, 10, 25. This is going to send an invite to the individual that we're sending this share to securely access this file in Paperless Parts, because as a finisher, you know, I promise you, they're all using Excel sheets as well, right? They probably just want to know surface area. They might want to know part weight. All that information is available with this part, right? So, you know, we go ahead and say, yep, we want them to not download the file. We want them to upload supporting files so they can add their quote. And then we're going to tell them that this quote expires on the 23rd. And then we're going to start this chat. And this is going to invite them to create a Paperless Parts account, no charge to you, no charge to them, so they can come in, access this file, see all that information, and submit their RFQ back. Can it be exported into Excel to calculate landed costs? So one of the benefits of being a modern software is that every single piece of data that you see here, like numbers and information, can be exported to Excel. And we do that on a case-by-case basis with each shop, because, you know, often requirements are different for each shop. But the answer to the question is yes. Okay, as a new user, are actions the default way to populate metrics of setup times, shop markups? Actions, refresh pricing. No. So refresh pricing, regenerate pricing. This would be like if you updated a material cost, for example, and you want that to update on all of these parts. Right, that's what refresh pricing would do, for example. So the way that you would populate setup time, shop markups is with this process. You would choose your process that would bring in your template of distinct costing steps. And just to show you what that looks like, right? Okay, we go look at this 3-axis milling template. Every single time I choose that template, material bar pricing, CNC programming, 3-axis milling, deburring, those all come in. We build these templates with you during the implementation process. And then we make it super easy for you to go in and add steps as you see fit. So if you want to go add a sheet metal, if I can type this morning, sheet metal finishing step here, it's like, boom, we come in. Okay, I want to add in this sheet metal generic step. You add in your steps as you see fit as they go beyond the standard template. And then you can always add in pricing items as well. Maybe you want to do a customer specific markup, perhaps. Can it send multiple parts to quote at once? It absolutely can. That's what this digital quote is showing right here. I've seen 100 line item quotes sent before, right? Which, you can, judge for yourself. I mean, what the experience might be for the customer, but you can send as many line items as you want on one individual quote. Do you need to have part master files in JobBoss for Paperless Parts to grab information on a part or similar part? You would drop in the files in Paperless Parts. So we're not pinging over, I assume part master files is like the actual 3D file. And Rebecca, keep me honest if that's not the case. But you would drop in all your files into Paperless Parts. And then what we do when you upload a part is we go look through the entire library and say, hey, have you done anything that's an exact match or similar to this? In Paperless Parts. It's not referencing your shared drive. It's not referencing SolidWorks. It's not referencing JobBoss, any of that information. Cool basics. How can I change lead time? 5 weeks. 5 weeks is defaulted in the system. Where can I change the due date versus weeks? So within each of these individual components, you can go ahead and change lead time to whatever you would like. So if we scroll down, I had overrode those. One of the things that's nice as well, lead time is, and lead time and scheduling is like one of the other fascinating, aspects to estimating. There's different schools of thought. I just read The Goal by Eli Goldratt, which is all about like theory of constraints. It's an awesome book. And you could do like snowball effect, which is like, oh, okay, great. My cycle time per part is 3 hours. There's 10 hours of setup, 18 hours of setup on the programming time. So you can do like 18 plus 20 plus 3 hours times 10 plus 25 plus 50 plus 100. So you're like almost snowballing like, hey, what's the actual lead time? But then you can start to get into like, hey, what's capacity available? So at the end of the day, we always give you the flexibility to override this to whatever you actually want to communicate and deliver to the customer for lead time. And then the due date at the top up here, you can say, yep, this quote expires on January 14th, and it's due on the 16th, for example. Cool, yeah. Zakir, Rebecca, much appreciated. Happy holidays as well. What format will customers get the quote? They will receive this digital quote. If you traditionally send PDF quotes, right, they will get this digital quote. They will be able to download a PDF of this digital quote. If you work with OEMs that require you to do some sort of cost breakdown, as I was mentioning earlier, we can build out quote exports so that you can automatically export all of that information into an Excel sheet formatted in the way that you might traditionally do it today. So, the short answer is however you deliver quotes to your customers today, they will still receive that format. And in the event that you typically just send them PDFs today, perhaps out of your ERP system, you can send it right through Paperless Parts in this super clean digital presentation. What else? Come on, someone's got some more. Justin Walsh, you got any questions over there? Justin also works at Paperless. Nothing. This is, you effectively have an open book, right? No questions about Paperless Parts from the 19 attendees. I see there's some duplicates, so we'll call it 15.
Just want to quickly call out that if anyone wants to request a custom demo, you can just go to paperlessparts.com/demo. And we'll also be sure to follow up after this, but if you want to do that quickly, you can feel free to do that. I put the link in the chat.
Yep. So question came in, if we have different versions of the parts, does it have version control? The answer is yes, right? You've got part number and revision here. So the version control, this is not going to replace your PLM or like formal rev control software, but we do allow you to distinguish in the part number and revision, so you can actually go ahead and see the history of each part number and revision in Paperless Parts. Anonymous attendee, what's the cost of Paperless Parts software? It totally depends on each of the shops that we work with and the features and functionality that each shop needs. So on that front, I would encourage you to just reach out for a custom demo and speak to one of our sales representatives, and they'll square you away.
All right, Ben, what do you say?
I say thank you all for attending. Again, it looks like people are dropping off. I'll stick on if anyone has more questions. You can just reach out to my email, ben@paperlessparts.com, or you can shoot me a text or call me as well.